I spend so much time obsessing over the little details that this is like, golf is that thing where everybody's tweaking. Even the best players in the world are kind of finding like, okay, I'm number one. I just ended up winning a tournament like Tiger Woods. And now, like, let me make the biggest change possible and change my grip, the hardest change possible, and change the grip and take it to a tournament and see if I can win with it. Like, I think that to me just speaks so much, and that I'm always trying to figure out, okay, well, this is working. How do I make it work better? Like, what's that next thing look like? And just trying to build upon it and really trying to take it apart and say, okay, how do we perfect this? And then once we perfect it, like, is there any way to make that even better?
All right, welcome to The Path Distilled. I'm your host, Kevin Harris. My co-host is Lauren Tashman.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show today.
And today we have Jonathan Avalos. He's a golf fitness specialist, and he's the founder of Athletic Golf Fitness. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jonathan.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
So can you tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so mainly I'm a personal trainer, but I specialize with golfers. So I help them just get better control over their body and kind of help with their conditioning and just kind of owning their movements.
Okay. And are you yourself a golfer?
I try to be. I picked it up late. And so, it wasn't a sport that I grew up on. And, so golf's never a game that you master, I think anyways. But I think, the more reps you have in, the better you can be. So I'm getting my reps in.
That's what I always say to people. In quotation marks, I play golf.
Right.
So how did you get involved in fitness?
Yeah, so I grew up in Texas, and in Texas, I feel like sports are just everywhere. And so I grew up playing sports, and really just, everything that sports gave to me with, the confidence and just being able to be, an athlete and kind of move well, was just something that I felt like that I could give somebody else. Just because I had a lot of great coaches in my life, and it felt like, I could kind of, take on that next role. And so went to college, went to Texas A&M, and then got my exercise science degree, and then kind of moved into personal training. And then as I, continued with personal training, started kind of finding my niche, and just slowly kind of moved into golf.
What sport did you start out playing?
I started off playing football, and then and ran track. I played basketball. I played every sport really except for golf, which is kind of funny that I mainly work with golfers. But I started off with football, ran track, and just played a lot of unorganized sports. But as far as organized sports came, it was one of those things where football and track didn't overlap in high school, and so I could play both of those or participate in both of those. And then and so just the way it's kind of funny how I ended up working with golfers was that I was mainly I'm just so competitive that even after college, I moved to Charlotte, and my best friend lives out here, and that's mainly why I moved out here. But we were just playing at a bunch of recreational, events, and I felt like it was just competitive and more competitive and more competitive. And all of a sudden, we're playing against guys who are like D1 athletes, and we're not, we're far removed from college. And so all of a sudden, we're getting hurt, and I'm coming home and I'm like icing up every weekend. I can barely move, and then I'm going into my week and trying to coach people, and then going back into the weekend. And my wife is like, you just got to stop this. Like, you're always hurt. You're pulling muscles all the time. Just find something else that you can do. And so I had a coworker who gave me some golf clubs, and felt like, how hard could this be? It's a ball that doesn't move, and quickly found out that's not the case. And so I've been kind of struggling with the sport ever since, but that's really what led me into just my curiosity of, okay, why am I not good at this? Is the way that I'm training, is it not helping me out? Is it hurting me? And so there, like, I started getting, certified and learning more, and quickly became certified with Titleist Performance Institute. And, really just kind of like their model. Their motto really is that there's 1,000 ways to swing a golf club, but there's one specific way for you to swing a golf club. And I felt that really tied into the way that I train, and that there's, I have so many different athletes and so many different clients with so many different needs. And there's thousands of ways to train those individuals, but there's one way that's right for them. There's one way based on their personality, based on the things that they're good at. and just trying to find, how can we connect, on that level, and then how can we, make sure that we involve fitness around that and try to get you more interested in to where it becomes more of a habit for you, not something that you have to do, but something that, that you do because it's who you are. And so I felt like that's a good way to train golfers too. And then, okay, let's figure out, how can we connect your swing, to the way that you move. And then let's figure out a way that where we can, make those a little bit more efficient for you. And so, yeah, that was really my kind of tie into golf and fitness, and how it was a tough transition because I didn't have a lot of background in golf, but it was an easy transition in that I felt like, one of the things that are my strengths is really trying to find that connection on, on a personal level. And then everything, kind of happens around that. But it's more of, okay, what's one way we can motivate you and inspire you to really, take your fitness or take your golf performance to the next level. And, everything else kind of comes behind that.
And so were you a fitness trainer prior to working with golfers?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah. So I was a fitness trainer prior to it, and, kind of just worked with just your everyday business professional. And it turned out that, 70% of my business professional clients they all play golf on some level. Some of them are really, it's like their whole life. And some of them are more of, hey, this is where business happens. And a couple of them are just, it's their way of just kind of getting out of the house or getting out of the office and just kind of going and relieving some stress. So they all had a background in golf already. But now I kind of work with people that are like extremely serious about golf, and they're trying to play it on a professional level. Or they are playing it on a professional level, or, it's guys who are playing, these amateur events that there's no money involved in it, but they're super competitive events that, they're club events and championship events. So I kind of work from recreational to more competitive golfers now.
And was that high percentage of the golfers or the professionals were golfers? Is that what started getting you to think about working solely with golfers?
Yeah, because that conversation was kind of always there. It was like, yeah, my shoulder hurts because I was playing golf, or my back hurts because I was playing golf. So I was already kind of, working in that role. It just wasn't my main focus. It was more of, okay, are we trying to lose weight? Are we trying to just get you to, feel better? And instead of, okay, let's figure out and really dial in what's causing you to, have that low back pain, and starting to understand more of the golf swing and understand, the roles and responsibilities that your body plays in your swing. And then trying to figure out, okay, well, if your shoulder's tight, could that lead into your back? And so it starts kind of, just like anything, the more experience you have with it, all of a sudden you start to have these dots to start connecting each other and saying, okay, well, now I understand why that's happening in your swing. And all of a sudden now, instead of just kind of helping you with work around your pain or kind of get you out of pain, now we can really start to kind of figure out how can we dial that into your performance. If you're trying to do this specific move, now I understand not so much of, of getting you out of pain, but how do we get you in a position to make that move a little bit more consistent, or to make it a stronger position for you.
Take us back to high school for a second. What led you to want to pursue this in college?
It was mainly, honestly, it was just, I didn't really know what I was going to do in college. And I wasn't a bad student, but I just wasn't a good student. It was just that sports was like everything to me growing up. And so there was nothing that I was going to do to jeopardize that. Like, I didn't even drink in high school at all, like not at all. Because I was so focused on, okay, I want to get a scholarship. I want to, pursue this, and everything. And my whole focus and attention was just strictly on that. And, once you get to college, you understand that there's 1,000 athletes that are so much better than you. And it's like everywhere, that they're pulling in from, not just from your local town. But I still wanted that to be a part of my life. And I just felt like that was just so much of who I was. And, really it was just kind of that thing of, I wasn't a great student, wasn't a bad student. And I wasn't necessarily a great athlete. I just had really good coaches that were just so good at, making time for you and really, investing in you. And I felt like there was a lot of value in who I became, and because of the value that they instilled in me, and felt like, what, if there's anything that I can do and, that I want to do, would be to give that to somebody else. And felt like, it made such a huge impact in me and gave me so much direction and focus that, if I could do that for somebody else, and I should.
Is there a particular memory that stands out about an experience you had with a coach?
There's so many that I'm trying to kind of dial into just one specific. Honestly, I would just say just the small interactions, not so much on the field, but in the hallways. A lot of the coaches are teachers, and so just them, kind of giving you this look of like, hey, you're supposed to be a leader here. Like, are you acting like a leader in the classroom? Are you acting like a leader in the hallway? If there's somebody who's getting picked on or someone who's not being talked to, like, that doesn't mean that just because you're a leader on the field doesn't mean that you can't be a leader where you're at. And so I feel like just the little looks they would give you, or just kind of them pulling you aside and saying, hey, like, people are looking up to you even if you don't know it. So make sure that you're staying focused in school. Like, make sure that you're not acting up. And so just the little things, the things where you don't feel like people are seeing you, and just kind of knowing that, like, hey, this is who I am. It's not something that I'm just doing. I think that was probably the biggest interaction that I had with coaches, was the words that weren't said.
And so were you playing sports once you got to college, or were you solely a student at that point?
I was gonna try to, and just kind of I knew my place right when I got there. And so I just said, I'm just gonna focus on school. And plus I love my parents, and I have amazing parents. They were just a little strict. My mom wasn't, my dad was pretty strict. So it was my like first step of like freedom, really, So I was like, you know what? I never really had that with sports or at home, and now I do. So I'm gonna take advantage of it, and so try to take advantage of the full college experience.
And so you're majoring in exercise science. You've been, after college, you're training others. You find the professionals, or many of them are golfers. So what happens between then and when you go to the Titleist Institute?
Yeah. So I just kind of knew, my dad he owned his own business, a small business. He was always kind of like saying, like, not that he doubted me, but he was just, I think he was always trying to get the next thing out of me. And so he was constantly saying, like, hey, like, I know you want to do fitness. There's not a lot of money in it. What are you going to do once you're like, once you're not, in good shape anymore? What's going to happen then? What's your life going to look like now? Think of it from like a long term. This is something that you want to do. And I just remember telling him, like, good ones still find a way to make money, Dad. Like, the best in the world at anything can make money. And so I was kind of quickly, in my argument, I was just trying to find, with him, like, not an argument, just a conversation with him, trying to find, okay, well, I got to find a niche. I got to make myself, a little bit different here. And I knew that training people is more, is general, but you're competing against tons of people, which is fine. I'm good with competition. But I just kind of knew that, okay, I got to dial into something, and I got to really kind of find my niche and something that really just kind of inspires me and moves me. And, just in conversations, like I said earlier, with just a lot of guys and people that I was working with, everybody was, it's golf. All of a sudden next I get golf clubs. I'm terrible at it. I'm kind of learning about Titleist, and I'm saying, okay, well, this is something that, like, it speaks to me on the way that I train. And I can understand more about the golf swing. I can connect better with my clients who play golf. And then, maybe, before I even knew it, maybe this is the thing that kind of separates me if I can really, which I had a lot of passion in it, because I was so bad at it. It was just kind of this discovery process that felt like, okay, this is the thing that's going to take me to the next level. This is going to be the thing that I can really, spend a lot of time, focusing on and diving into, and really trying to understand it from, the most basic level to the most kind of extreme level. Because I got guys who are, they're not good movers and they're not good golfers, and I got guys who come in and they don't look like they're the best athletes, and you get them moving around, and you're just like, gosh, I didn't realize you're this athletic. Like, where did this come from? Or I got a guy who, one of the guys, he's a good friend of mine. He's a golf coach, and he's not a big guy. He's like 5'7", 150 pounds, and he bombs it like he's like he could have played on the PGA on the tour. He ended up hurting his back early on, but he's like incredibly fast, like swing speed. Everything's just amazing. It doesn't fit the mold. And it's so hard whenever you get somebody who's not very athletic and not very good at golf to somebody who's like super athletic and super great at golf, and then just trying to figure out, okay, how can I help these two people out? And it was just that thing where I felt like I spend so much time obsessing over the little details that this is like, golf is that thing where everybody's tweaking. Even the best players in the world are kind of finding like, okay, I'm number one. I just ended up winning a tournament like Tiger Woods. And now, like, let me make the biggest change possible and change my grip, the hardest change possible, and change the grip and take it to a tournament and see if I can win with it. Like, I think that to me just speaks so much, and that I'm always trying to figure out, okay, well, this is working. How do I make it work better? Like, what's that next thing look like? And just trying to build upon it and really trying to take it apart and say, okay, how do we perfect this? And then once we perfect it, like, is there any way to make that even better? So that's kind of my personality and the way that my mind works. And so it's like perfect for golf.
So is this something that you come up with while you're not with the client and then bring it to the client, or do you usually work with the client to come up with the best way to move forward?
Both. Both. I mean, it's always funny because, like, I'll be, playing with my 4-year-old, and all of a sudden a thought comes up to me, or the way that we're playing, and he's like constantly changing the rules on me, and we're playing a game, and all of a sudden I'm kind of thinking about, like, this is a perfect analogy to use with, my client, the way that, even like Sesame Street and some of the lessons they bring forth with that, it's like mindset coaching, right? On a 4-year-old of, getting in the chair or something. And then all of a sudden I'm kind of thinking of, okay, well, like, this is a perfect illustration of how I can, coach this up, because a lot of times it's more of like, when it comes to the client, it's more of just the buy-in of like, I don't want to lift heavy because I get sore. And I'm like, well, that's fine. It's just that we're just going to get better at being average. Like, we're not going to be able to be great if we don't get stronger, because that's where we have the biggest opportunity here for you. So a lot of times it's more of just trying to make sure that I can explain that and give that message to them where they can receive it and accept it and say, okay, well, I'm willing to be sore if that means that I can, have a chance here. And I think that's the biggest thing we're trying to do is give athletes the best chance possible, give them, the ability to say yes, to this new swing change or this new way of training, and say, okay, yes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to commit to it, and I'm going to be fully dialed in, and have intention behind every single movement and every single thought behind it, and be willing to take this, and make this a part of my game. And so I think that's the biggest thing for me. It's trying to figure out always just, I'm sorry, what was that?
No, sorry, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just finishing up with just, I think the biggest thing for me is just trying to make sure that whenever I'm coaching, it's more about getting them to just kind of buy into the whole thought process of it.
So what are some of the things that you find easy and challenging about what you do?
What I find easy is that, I believe that your golf swing is a direct reflection of the way that you move, and that if we find any restrictions or you're stiff or tight, then that's going to show up in your swing. And so that's easy. It's easy to understand that, and to make those adjustments, even on the fly. Like, if somebody comes in and they slept wrong, we can kind of figure out, okay, well, this is how you normally move. This is what's going on. And then let's make sure that doesn't show up in your swing. I would say the hard part is just that I didn't grow up playing golf. And so, with that whole communication, it's almost a communication barrier, and that, they're like, and it's probably more in my mind than it is in theirs, of just saying, okay, well, like, am I a fraud? Like, I know how to move well, and I understand the body, and I understand the swing so much, and I understand how you're supposed to do it and how this can affect your swing and how we can take your performance to the next level. But I haven't done it in my own self. And so sometimes I think as a coach, it's kind of like, okay, well, like, for the most part, I'm fit and I move well. And so it's easy for me to demonstrate a movement and for them to see it, and then for them to kind of pick it up. But then it's hard to have that conversation of, okay, well, this is what you really need to do to take your performance to the next level. And yet I haven't done it in my own game. And so, sometimes it's trying to ignore the voices that are going in my own mind, and kind of, and always try to focus, because I think that's the real goal, is to focus on coaching that individual up, and instead of making me a part of, of what I'm trying to teach them, and just kind of making it all about them. So I think the hard part is is getting them to buy in when sometimes I don't believe it, it helps me out very much in my own game.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, based on that part, or basically all of what you said, did you already have a successful following when you founded Athletic Golf Fitness, or did that happen after you had founded it?
I would say I did locally, but not on like a social media platform at all. It was more of my wife was like, you should really use social media to promote yourself. And I was like, why? My schedule's so busy. And she was like, well, like if you believe so much in helping people, this is an easy way for you to help more people and, get your name out there. And maybe this could help you get, somebody, who's on the pro level, or, somebody who's like, right there, or who just doesn't know about you yet. And they need your particular type of coaching. And so I would say, locally, I felt like I was making a lot of progress with my clients. I felt like I was making a big impact. And then socially, it's kind of funny because socially, it's more with like other coaches, which is kind of funny, where I'll get somebody who ends up sending me a message and saying like, hey, I've been following your content and I love it. And I started my own, golf performance center, and they're a physical therapist, or, they're another coach. And so I would say that, that's been really, it's made a lot of meaningful, like, impact with me, and just kind of knowing that, like, it takes me a couple minutes to record a video and upload it and write some kind of caption with it. But it makes a big difference. And that's really, where coaching matters so much in my life, is that that's what I'm trying to do for my athletes, but that's what I'm trying to do for everybody, is just say, hey, can I be, can I be a leader, when nobody's watching, and can I be a leader and just kind of make time and put content out there? And if it helps inspire another coach, or if it gives somebody who, is in another country. I have some clients who are online who are just from other countries that kind of reached out to me and DM me and said, hey, love your stuff. Is there any way that we can, you can coach me online? And so I would say that, locally I felt like I was successful, but now I feel like I'm making a larger impact and a greater reach with social media. And that's where kind of Athletic Golf Fitness kind of started more.
I was just going to ask that, tell us a little bit about what led to you starting your own business and what that was like.
Yeah. And so I was an independent contractor, and so, there's a guy who owned our facility and owned all the equipment, and basically we just kind of had this split, and it was great, but I just felt like, okay, kind of like that conversation with my dad of like, okay, I got to have a niche. And then outside of this, like it's his facility, but I need to have like my own branding towards it, especially like now. I think with all coaches, you should have your own branding, especially like when we have an epidemic like we have currently, and that you have to have some kind of control over the business that you're in, even if you are renting space. Mm-hmm. And so luckily I kind of got ahead of that and just said, you know what, this is going to be my name. This is going to be my focus. And this is going to be something that I'm going to try to do to really kind of grow in the future and have this as my career. Because if, something happens to this facility, or, a year ago, I moved out of the facility and moved into a larger facility where we have 5 physical therapists, massage therapists. So it's more of kind of a big team approach, which is what I love. And so, I was able to kind of remove myself from that one facility and kind of take myself and my client and clients with me, my business with me as I go. And now I'm taking it online. And so I feel like, it's kind of this evolution. If this is your career, I feel like there's a big part of branding and kind of making your name known, separate from the facility that you work at.
And how has your view of training changed over the years, if at all?
I would say my view has probably just been that, I think just with wisdom, kind of understanding, a lot of it was just more experience of kind of seeing things. And now it's more of just not making assumptions about things that I see and saying, okay, well, why is this happening? Instead of me just saying, well, this is the reason why it's happening, me just trying to understand and have those conversations and kind of bring it out. Because sometimes it's more of a, it could just be that the client doesn't understand the movement itself, or maybe it's just that there's something going on personally that I'm just not aware of. And so it's trying to look at it just from a lot of different angles versus me just assuming, okay, this is why this is going on. Like, you're not lifting this well because this is what's going on. And maybe they didn't sleep well because they're having an argument with their wife, or maybe it's because of, of other factors that just aren't, present to me. So it's kind of more trying to train that invisible thing that I'm not seeing, and just trying to make that aware of in my mind, of just saying, okay, well, for whatever reason, I'm not getting through to them right now currently. So how can I, is there a conversation that I need to have? Do I need to make a little bit more time for them after the session? Do I need to know more a little bit about, what's going on, in their head than I do with just kind of with their movements itself. So I think just kind of understanding it on a larger scale than just like, okay, this is, it's as easy as this, because I think it's not. I think coaching, goes well beyond just kind of me looking at you do something, or you telling me what to do and then me doing it. I think there's so much of mindset, and I think there's so much of just understanding what's kind of going on and other factors that are going on and playing a role in that, your performance.
So what does your process look like for working with clients?
So normally I'll get somebody in, we'll go through an assessment. And so TPI, we believe that, if you're not assessing, then you're guessing. And so we're kind of looking at your movement, really trying to figure out, okay, what's causing it. So we have a game, we have a game plan, and we have a blueprint for your movement. And then from there, trying to figure out where you're at, and then kind of working backwards. But I really just kind of, in between sets and even afterwards, just try to find out, how can I connect with that person? How can we, how can I get to understand them a little bit more? I think that's kind of the biggest thing, that I just try to connect as much as I can with just the individual itself, just because I feel like, anybody can coach, anybody can tell anybody what to do. But I think for me, in the relationships I've had, and just having some really great coaches around me, it's that extra time, it's that extra value investment that they make towards you that makes the biggest impact. And so I always try to approach everybody that way. Coaching, there's a process, but I think for me, it's more of just trying to understand, who you are, like, who are you, and, what makes you tick, and how can we get the most out of you? And so that's really more my process than anything else.
And has your success over the years kind of reduced that feeling that you had in the beginning that you shouldn't be doing it because you weren't really great at golf itself?
A little bit, because I can be so much of like a head case myself, but it's always those little things, like, and it's so funny because I'll have some guys who are just like these phenomenal golfers, but usually the biggest wins are like the guys who are like, hey, I played and like my back didn't hurt, or it's, the whole like, hey, I'm getting older and my son finally enjoys golf, but now my body is breaking down and I can't have that time with them, and it's just ruining me. And so those are the things that that make the biggest difference. And to me, like, I'm always like, I got a couple guys who are just like unbelievable, and I think they're going to make me famous at some point. But, just hearing those stories of like, hey, this is who I thought I was in my head. I thought I was a good athlete, and I used to be a good athlete. And over the time, like, I've given so much to business and to my family, and now I have time to invest in myself. And, and I'm kind of losing my identity in that process because I'm no longer good. Work's kind of taking a toll. My body's getting older. I'm losing, range of motion. And I just, I have time, but I just can't make the most of it. And so I think right now we all have time, right? But not being able to take advantage of that. And so whenever I hear stories of guys just being like, hey, I feel like I'm younger again. Like, I feel like I used to feel beforehand. I can play with my kids. I can play golf. I can go play with my buddies for more than just one day. I'm not having to say no to the things that I like to do, and I can say yes to that. That's what really kind of drives me and motivates me. So whenever I am having those thoughts, or those kind of like, man, should I be doing this right now? Should I just kind of, I can always, go back into kind of slowly drift back into just kind of training general population. But it's just something that I really want to focus on. And then you get those text messages of like, pain-free today, big win, or it's like, you got a guy who's like, a couple of guys who have their own businesses and they're super successful, and they're like, I ended up taking $20 from my friend today. I'm like, $20, that doesn't mean anything to you, but it's just like, it's just this huge, they're so pumped about it, right? It's like this, like, yeah, I'm on top of the world. And I think that's such a great feeling to have, those moments of just kind of being competitive and kind of enjoying life again. I think, fitness can give us so much, it can give us so much confidence in who we are. It can give us that identity, but it can also kind of give us back what we used to have, whenever we were younger, or just kind of that sense of just competition again. I think a lot of people that are super successful, sometimes their success kind of makes them stagnant in just kind of their life. So when you can give them something like, hey, I took $20, like that's like 5 minutes of your time, hourly, but to them, it's like their world, it's like I'm making progress again. I got something back. So I think anytime you can give back like that, whether it's like on a big scale or a small scale, I think as a coach, as a person, I think you gotta find those moments and just kind of invest in and get over whatever thoughts you have in your head and just kind of say, let me see what I can do for other people and be a team player.
As a different type of coach, and someone who also teaches and supervises grad students who are looking to go into coaching, one of the things I talk a lot about with them is thinking about that idea of coach client fit and what that might look like. So what are your thoughts on that for you? What have you noticed about the clients that you seem to really gel with versus those that maybe aren't a good fit for you?
That's a great question. I would say that, it's funny because I've had some clients who aren't a great fit, and they take so much of my energy and kind of motivation and positivity.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm kind of telling my wife, like, like I've thought so much about like canceling this person and taking them out of my schedule. And she's like, well, why haven't you then? And I'm like, you know what? Because I've been training them for 4 years and they're just not happy. But I think I'm like, we'll I'll get a couple of laughs and a couple of smiles at them. We'll get some, a couple of conversations like once a month, get a good month out of them. And then it's kind of like just pulling teeth for 3 months. But I was kind of telling her, I'm like, I don't know if anybody ever makes time for them. Like, I'm not sure, like, if, so like, it's not a good fit for me personally, but it's not about me. And you know what, like, if that means that like, I have to just like suck up my pride and ego and kind of get over myself. And it's a long hour sometimes where there's not a lot being said and there's just a lot of small talk, but they look forward to it and they're there on time. They show up and, even though like you don't feel like they're always giving you your best, like they're there and it's an opportunity for you to kind of make an impact, whether you know it or not. And I think sometimes, those sessions, it's like my dad used to always say like that, it just builds character, like stuff you don't like to do is just building character. And I think it just kind of builds character in me, but I think it just, I don't really, going back to it, like those are the things that I just don't see. I don't see what's going on. I don't see like on how unhappy they are. Like, I don't see like if it was really tough for them to like get up and come in to want to work out. Like, I don't know if people are making time for them. And so there's so much that just goes on into that stuff that I'm just unaware of. And so, a lot of times when I'm like, it's not a good fit, they're not a good client, like they affect my day and I'm having to like pump myself up for the next person and pump myself up for the next person, pump myself up for the next person afterwards. And then 3 hours later, I'm kind of, out of it. And I got that one client who, I have a lot of clients like this who come in and I'm like, after our session's done, I'm like, I didn't realize like the time flew by. And there's some clients that I'm like, I feel like I should pay you because you give me so much wisdom or so much like, so much fun to be around. And it was a blast. I didn't feel like why should I even get paid for this today? Where other people, I'm like, I got to charge you twice as much. But, it all comes down to it. It's just like, those are the times whenever I come home and I can enjoy my like time with my family and I can go to bed with my, put my head on my pillow, kind of knowing that like, hey, you know what? Like, when you signed up for this, you didn't sign up for like every day to be great, every client to be great, every like, interaction to be, top notch. There's sometimes we got to get a little scrappy and there's sometimes where, like things aren't going to go your way. And there's sometimes where like, you got to make the most out of every session. You got to make time for people, even if it's tough, like, even if it's like, if you don't feel like it's a good fit, because, I just have this feeling that like, if they're willing to come in, then, I can make a difference. Like, and whether that's like me being like, like listening to them complain for the whole hour. I remember I had a client who, or like her company was being bought out. She was with that company it was her only job out of college, and she was with them for like 30 years, and they're being bought by this UK company, and she was having to train people to basically take over her job because she wasn't going to be located here. Their headquarters weren't going to be located here anymore. And every day she came in and she was just complaining and complaining and complaining. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am over this right now. I get problems too. I'm just like, and it was like an hour. And then she was like, hey, is there any way we can get an extra session in tomorrow? And I'm like, no. And I'm like, yeah, I have time. And then, like 3 months later, she was like, hey, I just want to thank you. Like my husband has literally said, like, you should go and work out more, because when you come home, you just don't come home with those problems. I'm like, she's giving them to me. That's why. But, at the same time, it's like, that marriage, whether I knew it or not at the moment, was just a little bit better just because somebody was dumping their problems on me, even though it wasn't fun. But, it took up, a load from somebody else who maybe really needed that. And so there's so much that just goes on, behind the scenes, and just things you don't know until after the fact. I just heard this, this good sermon a second ago where this guy was saying, we're a bridge, and that, but a lot of times you're a bridge and you get walked on, and then you don't feel like you really don't understand how much you're appreciated until after they look back on what they just walked on. And so I think as coaches, and it's, especially for you guys, it's just like you give and you give and you give and you give, and you're just kind of like, I want to be used. And then sometimes you're like, I feel so used right now. Like I feel so, empty, and I got to go and give something else to somebody else. And those are just the moments where you're just kind of like, you know what, like if I can just be that bridge still that I signed up to be, and that coach who I wanted to be whenever I, first entered into it, then it doesn't mean that 20 years or 15 years or 10 years of experience should take that away. I should have that enthusiasm and that excitement and that willingness to continue to do that, regardless of, of all the great clients I have, doesn't mean that I can get rid of, the clients that I feel like aren't valuable to me or aren't bringing value to me. I think you have to bring value to people, and then that brings value to who you are.
It's certainly a great way of looking at it. You just mentioned coaching a female athlete, and obviously the conversation around female sports is big, and in particular in golf. So what is it like coaching men versus women?
It's funny because it's always different needs. Like guys are just like so stiff and rigid and like upper body dominant, and there's a lot of ego involved in that. And girls are just like, female golfers are just like, they're so like mobile, and they need to have like more stability. And so there's completely different needs. But it's funny because sometimes the guys, their egos are so big sometimes, which is kind of fun. Not all of them, but a couple of them, where you almost have to like, think the conversation through in your head to deliver it appropriately. Where I feel like girls you can be a little bit more direct, and they're kind of like, okay, I get it. Where guys are like, hey, let me figure out how I can not offend your ego and get that message through to you. Or girls are kind of like, they don't need the story behind it. They're just kind of like, okay, well, this is why this might be showing up. And they're like, okay, where guys are like, no, that's not it, because I feel like I can do that with this motion. And I'm like, not so much, Like I remember I was getting a golf lesson, and my coach like records everything. And he's like, you're moving your head a little bit in your backswing. I'm like, am I? Because I don't feel like I am. He's like, yeah, it's a little excessive. I'm like, seriously, I don't feel like I'm moving it. And then he like plays the video, and like my head's like, all the way over to the right hand side, and I don't really know it, but I'm so like, I'm just so really like willing to like defend my position in that. I feel like women are just not like that so much. They're just kind of like, like I can take it, just as long as I'm not aggressive, and I'm just like, direct and honest. I feel like women are better at taking that feedback in, where guys, you have to just soften it up or kind of come up with, I'm like telling these stories. That's where like going back to our conversation, like watching Sesame Street is like a perfect for like communication barriers of like, how do I make this, how do I get them to understand this, right? So it was like, I think the best coaches can like, teach it like, if you can explain it like you're teaching a kid, then you can explain it well. I think that's a lot for like, the ego and coaching men versus women. I feel like women are just like, just tell me what am I doing wrong? What do I need to fix? Where guys are like, no, I don't agree with that. Let's, so I'm like having like recorded, or we're having to like go back to like, well, let's test that movement, and then let's see where you really are at. They're like kind of like, you got to prove it to them.
Sounds like court.
Yeah, that's right. They make a strong case for their, their position for sure.
So what do you view as the keys to your success?
I would say just, honestly, like just making time for people. I would say that's probably the biggest thing, is just kind of, I always try to have these kind of moments where before I even go into my day, and really even to just a training session, of kind of having these conversations of, okay, these are the people that I have, like, how do I connect with them? Like, what do I feel like is going to be our conversation for today? What do I feel like? And I'm almost kind of having like it's almost kind of like how I used to play sports. I've kind of envisioned like, okay, like I know like every football game, there's always like that first drive is always like scripted out. It's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then after that, the game kind of goes on. There's a lot of adjustments that need to be made, but I'm always kind of trying to script out, okay, like what's our conversation? Like from our last training session to this training session, what's that conversation going to be? What are we kind of working on? What do I need to kind of focus on or keep in the back of my head? I know that they're kind of, one person, is going through a lot at work, or this person is, has a lot of success recently with the performance. And so just kind of knowing that those conversations are going to be completely different. Those interactions, the way that, my energy is going to be different. So almost kind of scripting out my day of understanding, who am I working with? What's the script? Do I need to spend a little bit longer time with somebody? Do I need to be a little bit more patient with somebody? And so just kind of working all that stuff out ahead of time, and I don't spend a ton of time on it. Normally just when I'm in the shower, whenever I try to catch my workouts early in the morning, and then I'm trying to, frame my mind around, who I'm going to be around, and, who I need to be the best coach around them too. And so I'm just kind of trying to take that into effect, and then saying, okay, well, I know they're going through a lot. Let me just kind of, we banter a lot. So maybe if I'm bantering, give them control in that banter and kind of let them get the best of me. And it's so funny. It's like the smallest things like that, I think, can just change that energy around, kind of speaking into people. And I know they're kind of going through a lot, and just trying to speak into like, okay, this is who you are. Like, I know you're going through a lot, but like, hey, like you gained some weight, but like, you've also like, you started a great business from nothing. Like, you have a great family. Like, you are such a big person, like in your community. And so those are the big wins. And like, if you gain 2 pounds, that's 2 pounds. Like, you almost went bankrupt, and now you're like, you help other businesses out. Like, let's find out like what's really important to you. Like, you can get over this. And so just kind of knowing that, like, who I'm speaking to, kind of going into it with the conversations of like, my head of, what needs to be said, what's my energy level need to be, and, who do I need to show up for that person? So there's lots of times where I'm, kind of passive, and there's sometimes where I'm aggressive, and there's sometimes where I feel like I need to take a stance or kind of be, a little more assertive in our conversation. So just trying to understand that beforehand before I go into that session.
What have you learned about yourself throughout your journey?
I don't know enough. I'm always learning. It's always like, there's moments where I'm like, gosh, I feel like I got it all figured out. And then something happens, and it's like, I don't know enough, And so just kind of keeping that mindset of this, just kind of knowing that I don't know it all, that I got to continue to learn, and just kind of be open-minded, and just kind of know that, like, this is what I think. I'm not going to like, I'm not going to be completely firm on it. And I'm going to take, some time to reflect on it and kind of see, okay, is there any, what can I take from that?
What are some of the things that you do to continue to learn?
I mean, I do a lot of continuing ed. I'm always trying to like, learn from some of the greatest, some big coaches. We have, I joined this monthly mastermind group where we all kind of get, get on a call every month and kind of say like, okay, what are you guys working on? What's working for you guys? What are we seeing in the industry? This has been a big, this has been trending a lot right now. Do we agree with that? Do we not agree with that? And so just kind of getting other coaches' mindsets, getting their position on certain, topics. And then, reading and just, I learned a lot from social media too. I kind of look at a movement and say, oh, that's kind of interesting. And so I'll ask questions or just kind of look into it a little bit more. Especially when it comes to just, my clients are like, hey, my arm's kind of breaking down and when I get to the top, what do you think's causing that? And a lot of times it's kind of like, well, I don't see any restrictions. I don't know if it's a motor control issue. Is it, is it something that it's a habit for you? Is it, is it working for you? Do we need to change it? And so I think just kind of asking questions and just kind of keeping an open mind, just kind of saying, okay, this is how it is right now, but let me kind of figure out, do we need to spend time on this or not? So I would say mainly just kind of asking questions is probably the biggest thing for me.
And so who are one or more of the coaches that you look up to?
Mike Boyle is the man. He's he's the Jerry Seinfeld of coaching. I always feel, because he gives these really funny analogies that are just kind of quick and to the point, and it's common sense, so it almost kind of makes you laugh at the way that you're thinking. But he's just so smart, and he asks such good questions all the time, and so I think that's where me asking questions all the time in my head, or with things that I'm seeing, I would say it's probably made the biggest impact. I think any big strength and conditioning coach, if you polled, 100 of them, I think 90% of people, he'd be the first person that they would say, honestly. He's made the biggest impact in fitness in the last 20 years, I would say.
And what advice would you give an aspiring, either a golfer and then after that, a golf trainer?
Yeah, so the biggest, I would say it's not so much in, I always thought of okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? What do I need to do? And I have these big expectations of myself. And I would say the thing that kind of cleared all that up and made me a better coach was, instead of saying, okay, what do I need to do? Instead of the what, it's more of who do I need to be? And I think that's probably and even for athletes too, it's kind of okay, they're hey, I need to do this. What do I need to do? I'm what are your habits? Who do you need to be? Do you need to be somebody who goes to sleep on time, who, is eating better? Because those are the things that make the biggest difference. It's somebody's do you think I need to go on keto or paleo? And I'm maybe you just need to stop drinking so much beer all the time. Maybe you just need to learn how to control your stress, and that could be your easiest win. And so it's more of the who and the habits that you have versus the what and how you're going about doing it. And so I would say, even for coaching, and I would say for most things, it's more trying to figure out who versus the what.
I feel like this might be a good segue into the picture that you sent us. We asked you to send us something that represents or epitomizes you or your path. So tell us a little bit about why you chose this image.
Yeah, and so faith is probably one of the biggest things that's allowed me to be in the position that I'm in today. I would say that, especially so this is a picture of Elevation Church, and this is the church that my family and I go to. And it's just made a huge impact just in our lives and our family, and just the way that we communicate, and just kind of all the things that we've gone through personally, and just kind of allowed us just to persevere and kind of look through life through, it's not about us. It's about helping people. It's about helping people, understand something on a bigger scale than themselves. And just kind of knowing that, there's more to the world than just, making money or having, status. And that, I think if you focus on people and help them get what they want, I think you always end up getting what you want. But I think you end up just making such a bigger impact in just people's lives and getting them through some hard things also. So for us, we had, and I don't really talk about it too much, I'm not really sure that too much why I don't talk about it, but we have a 4-year-old, and he was born with this syndrome it's called TAR syndrome. And it basically what it is was when he was born, he was missing his radius in both arms. So imagine like your radius is the arm, like the muscle or the bone that connects to your thumb. And so he's missing that, and his arm's much shorter. And also he has low platelets, so it's a hard chance of clotting blood. And so, for us, I just remember whenever we went to that, we go to this doctor's appointment, and they can't, they're like, they bring one person in, they bring the next person in, and they're like, and then they bring somebody else in, and we're like, all right, this isn't going well. Like, what's going on? And they're like, hey, we're going to have you go through like this other doctor who's going to go through this other ultrasound for you guys, just because we're not seeing something here. Don't worry about it. It's not going to be anything big. And so we're like, okay. My wife, afterwards, she's kind of crying because, it's the first pregnancy, and no mother wants to, no parents want to hear that, really. And so I'm like, it's going to be fine. We're going to get through this. No big deal. It's just, I can't see something. We're going to go in a better technology. And so we end up going to this, this specialty clinic, and, the doctor comes in, and we're like, hey, we're happy to meet you. And he's like, nobody's ever happy to meet me. And he gives us this news, and it's just kind of like, just, it changed our lives in a second. And I just remember, he was basically saying like, hey, it's early in the pregnancy, and we're not suggesting this or anything. We just give this option to everybody. Do you want to continue with the pregnancy or not? And within like a second, we're like, absolutely, we're going to continue with it. Like, why wouldn't we continue with it? And so he's like, okay, we just got to give it that option. Like, he's almost like, don't be mad at me. It's just like, it's our script. It's what we tell everybody. And so, we get out, and we took separate cars. And so my wife, I'm like, are you okay to drive? And she's like, I'm fine. I'm going to go to my parents' house. And they're just going to go pray. And I'm going to go pick up, our older son was at daycare, and I had to go pick him up, and he's going into first grade. And so second grade, I can't remember what grade it's on for, but it's like their meet the parent or meet the teacher day, it's right before school starts. And I just remember this, this sermon that I just listened to beforehand, and it was called like, whether you like it or not. And basically they're kind of saying like, as we walk through, and he kind of pauses, and he ends up kind of instructing people of like, don't you just love how God says, like, as we walk, he doesn't tell us to like pause, doesn't tell us to like stand still, doesn't tell us to like stop. He just tells us continue to walk. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be something that we're going to walk through. We're not going to feel sorry for ourselves and take a break from life. This is going to be something that like makes us closer as a family. This is going to be something that where we get to see God more, because we're going to need to pray more. We're going to need to kind of rely on each other more. We had such a good church that kind of came together and surrounded us, and just gave us so much support. It really kind of strengthened our faith. And they would just welcome, our sons in, and it's one of those places where like they're excited to go. They're like, can we go to Elevation? I'm like, it's Tuesday. Like you were just there Sunday. Like it's 2 days later. Like we got to wait a week. And they're like, fine. I'm like, 4-year-old's like closing the door on me like he's a college kid, But it's just such a big part of us, and just kind of who we are. And I think, faith has just gotten us through so many things. And even, when the coronavirus came out, we're kind of like, okay, like this isn't what we want to happen, but we're going to look back on this just like anything else. We've looked back on our lives and say like, okay, and that's kind of what we did. We kind of like framed it. I remember like writing in my journal, I'm like, okay, there's going to be a moment where I look back on this and say like, hey, I was kind of like writing this like story out to like my wife and in my journal and saying like, there's going to be a moment where I look over to her at some point in my life. I'm not sure when. And I'm going to say like, hey, do you remember when the world stopped for like a couple months? Like, wouldn't we want to get one of those days back? And so that's kind of been one of those things whenever I'm feeling down and when I'm like, man, I don't know what we're going to do. I'm just saying like, hey, at some point in the future, I'm going to pray for another day just like this. So let me make the most of this moment that I have right now. And that's kind of what we've done with everything of like, no matter what comes at us, we're just kind of like, you know what, we're going to go through this with like a strong belief that not only are we going to get through this, but that we're going to look back on this moment and say like, gosh, we thought that was going to be something that was going to stop us or hold us back. And, that's what's really kind of propelled me through everything in my life of just kind of knowing that, we can get through anything. And we have such a strong community and support system in our church, but just in our family itself, and just kind of seeing how much stronger just our family is. I remember our older son, when we're praying, I'm like, all right, we got to speak into like our situation. And our son he's had like 6 surgeries in like 4 years, like big surgeries. And whenever he was first born, like that first year, he was going to the hospital, like it was like every week to get like blood transfusions, and they're checking his blood levels. And he is like the happiest kid you could ever imagine. Like he falls down, we hear this big like clunk, and he gets up, he's like, I'm okay. And he has like this huge like nod on his forehead. He's just like smiling and happy all the time. And so before that, he's like a year old, and our son was like, we're like, all right, we're going to pray. And he's like, God, thank you for, giving us Levi who can show us how to be happy when we're not healthy. And so I think that's just how we look at everything, is always kind of like, okay, this is something that's coming against us, but like, what do we have to like fight it? And we have a strong family, we have a strong, church, we have a strong community, and we have a strong God that we believe in. And, there's nothing that's going to hold us back. There's nothing that's going to stop us. So, and I think that's really what drives me in coaching, is kind of knowing that like, whether the person believes it or not, I can still, act it out to where like I remember like some of my clients, like I didn't tell them about it, but they were like, I didn't know that happened to you. When did that happen? And I'm like, well, he's 4 now. So like it happened when he was born, like he was born with this. And they're like, you never showed it. Like you never like came into work with like this, like, and I'm like, that is kind of, to me, I mean, it was almost not like that I was bragging to myself, but I was telling this to my wife of just kind of like how that's our faith. Like that should be how it is. It shouldn't be like, well, today I'm like a bad person, and next day I'm going to be like happy because like things are going well in my life. Like this is who I am. This isn't just like what I do. It's not like I come to work and I just want to be like this happy person. Like I'm happy inside. And, I think, being a coach, regardless, being a person, regardless of what happens to you, and just kind of knowing that like I can make the most of this. I can still inspire people and help people to like become more of who they want to be. Then, that's who I should be. And I think the faith that we have in our family, the faith that we get from our church just grows that so much in us. So yeah, that's been my story. That's kind of who I am.
That's a powerful story. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks. Yeah.
Your son's quote, how to be happy when we're not healthy, I thought that was powerful as well.
Oh yeah, thanks.
So it's not I don't know if anything can follow.
I know, I was like, this is going to be an awkward segue into this question we always ask everyone.
We might be able to guess your approach on this, but so Lauren and I met in graduate school, and part of what we've studied is expert performance and expertise, almost 2 decades studying that. And the age-old question in that is the nature versus nurture question. And so the extreme nature view would be you're born with everything you need. There's no need for any outside influence or environment. The extreme nurture view is that you're born with nothing to work with, basically, and everything's reliant on what you experience or the environment. And then, of course, there's everything in the middle. How do you feel about that in your observation of yourself and other athletes?
I mean, it's so funny because I think you're born with everything that you have. I just don't know if you're always aware of it all the time. And so that's where I think the environment and just kind of having a good support system around you can bring that out. And so, I would say it's still 50-50, even though I truly believe that you're born with everything you have, and everything that happens to you, you can make something with that. You always hear these stories of just kind of how somebody had nothing and they turned it into like, something that you really want, even though you wouldn't want to go through their life or that experience. And so I think, I still think it's 50-50, just because, just like I said, like we were, like my wife, whenever we first heard about this news, I came home and I'm like, I didn't know how to be like as a husband. Like I'm trying to like encourage her, but like I'm not encouraging myself. And I'm kind of thinking like, how's our life going to look? And luckily she found this group. My wife's like the most independent person anyway. So she was like, I'm not looking towards you, but she found this like group called the Lucky Fin Project, which is kind of funny. It's like after Nemo, because he has, the broken fin. And so she's like on there all the time, like constantly, like asking questions and learning and hearing about other people's stories. And then like at like nowhere, as she's like even going through like her, like, of us, her pregnancy still, she's like still being like that encouraging person, you know. And I think that's a perfect example of like how, you know, we have everything we need, something happens to us, and all of a sudden, you know, you find a new environment, you find some more, you know, like a new community. And I mean, on there all the time, like she's like the first person to respond still to this day of like, hey, we just found out we're going to this, can anybody give us like any news about theirs? And she's like, I mean, I swear it's like she has like this like a folder in her phone of just like images and like quotes and everything she uses. She just like uploads onto like a post quickly to like encourage another mom. There's a cool story where, you know, we had this family in Texas, which I'm from, you know, so they live out in Dallas. They fly up for this retreat, and their son's here, so he's like in this camp for this retreat. So they end up flying up to, I believe it's in Asheville, and they drove down to Charlotte so we can end up hanging out with them. And their son, you know, was born with, their youngest son was born with the same condition Levi was born with, on a much more extreme level though. And so he's about to go into everything. And I just kind of remember like saying like, gosh, like this is like, you know, they're basically like, hey, we're praying for everything that like everything that you've been able to experience with Levi, like all the successful surgeries, like where you guys are at right now. And I'm just kind of like, gosh, man, like somebody's always praying for your problems. Like somebody's always praying for your problems. The cool thing about that is that we're just able to kind of experience that each other. So we both had like strong faith, you know, but I think all of a sudden we have that environment where we can kind of come together and kind of bring the most out of each other. And, you know, even though we were past that hurdle, it still brought so much value to us and said like, okay, now we got to like encourage other people. Like we were experienced, we were in it. People, you know, encouraged us, we got through it. And then now like people who are going through it are encouraging us, so that now like we got to like, it's always like this kind of shifting and moving. And so I think, you know, I think you're born with everything that you have and everything that you need. I think the environment brings out and makes that aware of you to make, you know, to make that possible in your life though. I think a lot of people have a lot of things that they need, they don't ever use it though. And so, it's a hard answer because, you know, I'm like back and forth on it, but I truly believe if I had to say anything, I would say 50-50, because, you know, there's times where like my life is going great and I'm like, you know, like not to like my full like happiness until like something like bad happens. I'm like, why is it always like it takes something bad to happen in order for me to like rise up and encourage myself. And so, you know, I have everything. It's just that, you know, I need the environment to kind of shake that up a little bit in me.
Mm-hmm.
And what would you say is the biggest takeaway from your story?
I would say my biggest takeaway is that is really kind of learning how to speak into your situation and kind of know that like, okay, these are the bad things that are going on in my life. What are the good things? Like, you know, like my son, like he's not very healthy. He's in the hospital all the time, but like he's always happy. Like he doesn't have like long arms, but he's gonna have a big reach. Like he's gonna encourage so many people. He's gonna inspire so many people. He's inspired us so much in our lives and how we kind of look at things. And just kind of knowing that like, hey, like I'm going through this, but it doesn't mean that like I'm a victim of it. Like I can be like, if I can be like victorious in my head, then I can be victorious like with my actions and the way that I approach this. Like just because I'm having a bad day doesn't mean that like I can't go and encourage somebody else. I have a client who like literally like, I'm like, how do you get through your bad days, man? He's always happy all the time. He's like the mayor of like Charlotte. Like I swear, if you see him, he looks like the Monopoly guy. Like he's just giving out like money and like doing all kinds of stuff. But I'm like, how are you always happy all the time? And he's like, well, because like the days I'm not having good days, that's whenever I like try to help other people have like their best days. And so he's always happy because there's always somebody who's in need of something. And so he's just kind of looking. He's always looking for that opportunity just to make somebody happy and bless somebody. And there's so much reward in that. But I think when we can do that, you know, we can always do that for ourselves too. It's kind of like, okay, what are the things that are going well in my life? Like, let me be grateful for that. You know, the things that aren't going well, let me, you know, what's the opposite of that? Like, how can I speak over that? You know, and just trying to find strength in your situation. And I think it's kind of the biggest takeaway that, you know, we've had. Luckily, you know, we've had a great church. It really kind of helps us out and, you know, speaks words of encouragement over us. or we can kind of rely on the word and kind of know, okay, like we can get through anything, we can get through this. And just kind of looking back on that and kind of knowing that, like, hey, just because this happens to us doesn't mean that we can't use this for our good and for other people. So I would say being able to speak over it and kind of know that, you know, you're bigger than it, that you're larger than, and that, you know, you have everything you need, so you can always influence your environment too.
Awesome. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks.
The Path Distilled is hosted by Kevin Harris and Lauren Tashman, created and produced by Kevin Harris. The content is copyrighted by The Path Distilled, all rights reserved.